Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire on SportsGrid. Craig Mish back with you, going over the latest in the National Football League, Major League Baseball, NBA, college basketball, a little golf as well. We got it all going on this edition of NewsWire. Thanks for being part of our show here today with lots of breaking news to cover here on the program. Of course, we've got a big golf tournament coming up, and Brady Kannon will be with us to preview the tournament going on in Orlando, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. He had some great picks, I thought, last week on the show. Also, guest contributors from Legal Sports Report will be with us. In addition, all of this business with franchise tags and free agency in the NFL, it all is coming out here in the last 24 hours. Jacob Camenker from Sporting News joins us approximately 11:12 Eastern here on the show. So let's get started because we've got a lot to unpack here on the program. In case you missed this yesterday, let's get to this. This is the big one here. The Denver Broncos have decided to burn $37 million. Imagine that conversation. $37 million next season, the largest dead cap hit in NFL history. Russell Wilson's gone. He's no longer a member of the Denver Broncos. He'll play for the minimum somewhere else. But again, if you have that kind of money laying around that you could just spend on doing absolutely nothing, yeah, I guess this is the way you use it. I'm not sure. Needless to say, we'll find out where Wilson ends up. Jason Kelce will end up doing a podcast or television or whatever this guy wants to do in media. This guy is incredible. He announced his retirement yesterday. One of the most heartfelt retirement speeches that you will ever watch. All of the Eagles fans were there watching streaming. All of the players were there in person for his retirement, probably headed to Canton in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But needless to say, what a great announcement, I thought, yesterday, talking about his family and how much his father meant to him. Incredible stuff here. Great job by him. Wanted to mention that. Okay, now, with the start of the baseball season coming up, you're going to get injury news. I don't know that we're going to get any bigger injury news than we've gotten today. I mean, I think I got to go through this. I think I got 4 pitchers not being ready for the season as of this morning. So let's see if we can unpack it as quickly as we can to get to the other stuff. First of all, ESPN reports Lucas Giolito, who just got signed in the offseason by the Boston Red Sox, $38 million, I believe, over 2 years, is possibly out for the season. He could end up having to go reconstruction of elbow surgery. So this is horrible news for the Boston Red Sox. They were hoping that he could be part of their rotation, either their number 2 or number 3 starter, maybe even opening day, who knows. Not going to be the case. He could be out for the season. Speaking of which, in West Palm Beach, they announced this morning that Justin Verlander not going to be ready to pitch opening day or even the second game of the season behind Framber Valdez. He is going to start the season on the injured list as well. Unfortunately for him, going to need some more time. We'll see if this is a minor setback, major setback. Verlander, as we know, has had injury issues over the past year as well. In addition, the president of baseball operations at the St. Louis Cardinals this morning says Sonny Gray up against it to start the season with a hamstring issue. And the Marlins announced that Braxton Garrett, who pitched for them in the postseason last year, not going to be ready for their start of the season too. So I got 4 pitchers in baseball, unfortunately, with injuries. This is just the nature of the game at this point. So we go from the negative to the positive. If you're a Braves fan, we thought this was going to be the top story this morning, honestly. Ronald Acuna Jr. looks like he's going to be ready for opening day. He met with Dr. Neil Atrash in California, and they said all systems go. He's probably behind a few days, going to increase baseball activities, but should be ready for opening day. Again, that's where we thought we were beginning today. We ended up somewhere else. Josh Donaldson, he announces his retirement after 13 seasons. He was the 2015 American League MVP. We mentioned Sonny Gray earlier. As you see there, the MRI came back as pretty good, but needless to say, not going to be ready for the start of the season. Also, good news for those of you who play MLB The Show. They announced their new Women Pave Their Way game mode. First time ever, players can create and play as a female player. Pretty cool there. Okay, college basketball, top 25 came out yesterday. Kansas is out of the top 10 in the latest poll. They fell 7 spots to 14. Houston 1, UConn 2, Purdue 3, Tennessee 4, followed by Arizona and Iowa State. Those are the 2 there. Marquette star guard Tyler Kolek is out for at least 2 games. Has an oblique injury. They play the Big East tournament coming up next week, so we'll see if Kolek can participate in that. Houston's Joseph Tugler, done for the season. He was averaging 3.8 points a game. He has a broken foot. Houston will have to move on without him. And it looks like EA Sports' college football game is going to have to move on without Arch Manning. Arch Manning declining the opportunity to have his name and likeness involved in the game. $600 payment to Arch Manning if he just accepted his name in there. He says no. You know, obviously there's workarounds for this. Maybe you're able to play under a different name, maybe like Steve Fanning or something like that. With his number, by the way, you can create him in the game. But Manning opted out, said he wants to focus on just playing next year. We'll see. Okay. Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA last night. 6-0 since the All-Star break. Remember when everyone was worried about them? Not so much anymore under Doc Rivers. They beat the Clippers 113-106 last night. Started off 3-7 with Doc, much better since. Russell Westbrook undergoes hand surgery, fractured left hand on Monday. There's hope he can return for the start of the Western Conference playoffs, which begin in April. Donovan Mitchell, the Spider, he is out 3 games after knee treatment. Unfortunately for him, he will be out tonight against the very good Boston Celtics. And how about this? A new WNBA team appears to be coming, and guess where? To Toronto. Larry Tannenbaum's Kilmer Group proposes a bid to bring the 14th WNBA team north of the border to Canada. So congratulations there, if indeed it ends up happening. By the way, the New York Giants announced just a short time ago they will not franchise Saquon Barkley. He will become a free agent immediately, and that's done. His time in New York probably over. The time in Carolina for Brian Burns will continue. This is a bit of a surprise this morning. The Panthers have franchise tagged Brian Burns, so he's going to remain a player of the Panthers unless they trade him. Obviously not going very far at the end of the season will be the Panthers. The Dolphins are not franchise tagging Christian Wilkins. This is a surprise as well. He'll be one of the top free agents on defense going into the offseason. The New Jersey Devils have fired their head coach, Lindy Ruff. They've named Travis Green as the interim head coach for the remainder of the season. And Detroit Red Wings center Dylan Larkin is out for 2 weeks with a lower body injury. Left the game in the Red Wings 4-0 loss against the best team in hockey this season in my neck of the woods here in South Florida. That is the team favored to win the Stanley Cup. You thought I didn't know anything about hockey. Well, there you go. Florida Panthers have a shot to win the Cup, I think, this year. So that's the latest news and notes that we got for you here on the show. But there's a lot going on right now. And for those of you who may miss different parts of our show or some of the programming that we have on, whether it's Pharrell Coast to Coast or the Early Line or anything like that, you can always download the SportsGrid app. And by the way, it is available for iOS and Android. It'll tell you everything that you have going on with our company here at SportsGrid, our shows, our hosts, and everything else. And you see that QR code on your screen. If it's real small, screenshot it, make it bigger. If it's big enough, take your phone out, scan it, and download it. And you got the SportsGrid app. We're running that thing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is absolutely free. Also, good news today, I'm seeing here for the Pittsburgh Pirates, Andrew McCutchen back in spring training action as well. Lots of baseball news to start off the show. But yesterday, the biggest story in sports was Russell Wilson's inevitable release from the Denver Broncos. So now we begin the question. Could Russell Wilson still play effectively in the NFL? And if so, where? We'll dive into that. Coming up next, our friend Jacob Camenker from Sporting News with the latest on the National Football League. He is next here on NewsWire on this very busy day. And we'll be back right after these quick messages. So stick with us where it's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Don't go away.
The Lakers lose by double digits last night on the road in Phoenix against the Suns. The Suns get their first victory following the All-Star break, winning by 10 and covering.
Anthony Davis played 42 minutes in that game. LeBron James played 37 minutes in a loss. This is the same thing. It's like repeating this over and over and over. Sure, do you want to win these basketball games? Yes, but you sort of say to yourself, all right, at what cost do we have?
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like
This
is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to
Penn
find
State's
a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But
Right.
if we make them a third,
They get in.
this
is the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The books are treating the Celtics 4 points better at minimum than maybe every single team in the NBA. And so far, I believe they've covered every game since the break.
The Celtics' strict goal here, anything less than a finals appearance and a finals championship is going to be a failure for the Celtics. They got all the pressure in the world across the board here.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
NewsWire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
Late
sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. The NFL is always in breaking news cycle. We've got so many players today with the franchise tag going on and players being released and no shortage of news to talk about. So we thought today would be a good day to bring in Jacob Camenker for the latest on that. Jacob, great to have you back here on NewsWire. And it's like, if you're, I'm in baseball mode now, to be honest with you. But if you're a huge NFL guy like yourself, you're in like phone refresh day, right? Like it's just news just keeps coming out.
Absolutely. Every 5 minutes, it feels like we're getting some new rumor or piece of news. It's that time of year. We're kicking into full gear for free agency now that the combine is over. So looking forward to seeing what the days bring it. But like you, I am also looking forward to baseball season, getting some warmer weather up here in the Northeast.
Yeah, I'm getting ready for that as well. Before we get to Russell Wilson, let's just quickly recap a couple of the big stories that just came out in the last hour. I want your opinion on this. A little bit surprising to see Carolina franchise tag Brian Burns. That was not expected. Not a surprise at all to see Saquon Barkley not tagged by the Giants. My guess is Barkley's going to go somewhere else. I mean, with everything that he's gone through with this team the last couple of years, I would figure he's going to want to try at least go somewhere else to see if he could get that contract. But unfortunately, the way they pay running backs, I don't know, Jacob. Is Saquon going to get more than 1 year in the NFL next year? It's hard to say, right?
It's tough, but I do think he's the type of back that can get a multi-year deal. It's just a question of whether I don't think teams are going to shell out these 4 or 5 year contracts to running backs anymore unless it's the Jonathan Taylor types of the world who are having great seasons and, just need to be a part of that offense. But I think he's going to look at some potential contenders or teams with high-end offenses or good offensive lines. I know he's been mentioned in connection with the Texans at times recently. That's been part of the rumor mill. I could see the Bears potentially making a play for him because they have all the cap space in the world, and they're going to likely have a new weapon at quarterback in Caleb Williams. So you think that supporting him with Saquon Barkley and upgrading the offensive line might be a good play this offseason. So I would definitely keep an eye out on Barkley. I think the interest level is going to be high in him, but it will be interesting to see how long he remains on the market because, as you said, there's just no knowing what teams are going to be willing to pay running backs anymore.
No, you really don't. And at this stage, with the way the Dalvin Cook situation went down and some of the others, I mean, Alexander Madison's cut after just, getting to start 1 year. They recycle these running backs quite a bit. Now, quarterback is a different scenario. Everyone's still searching for the franchise quarterback. And a couple of years ago at this time, Jacob, a lot of people thought this was a game changer for the Denver Broncos to acquire Russell Wilson. Now, I know everybody likes saying they were right and this and that. I think I was the only person who didn't like this deal. I know it sounds crazy now, Jacob. You could go back and you could watch the SportsGrid videos from 2 years ago. I think I was the only one with any skepticism that this was going to work out well for the Denver Broncos. Now, it did not. Jacob, I don't know how you feel about this. Here's the way I feel about it. I think Russell Wilson got paid and didn't put his best foot forward that first year with Denver. That is my opinion. He didn't run around a lot. He didn't look good a lot. And the offense was obviously not very good. I thought he made a massive improvement from year 1 to year 2 with the Broncos, but it's almost like, Jacob, that stain of that first year really cost him.
Absolutely. That's one thing that people are going to be looking at is that year with Nathaniel Hackett, and they'll be saying, is that going to happen again? Did Sean Payton help him cover up the issues that were there that year? Or was that just an aberration in the whole thing where he just didn't mesh with Hackett and, like you said, didn't put his best foot forward? And I think you could make a case that that was absolutely what happened. I think that Russell Wilson can still be a solid NFL quarterback. And we saw it last year. I think he had 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. And was he the same playmaker that he once was? No, but he's also in his mid to late 30s at this point. So he's not going to be necessarily the same type of downfield, super accurate passer who has elite pocket mobility. Those days are gone. But I still think he can be a solid starter moving forward for a team that kind of misses out on maybe the higher end quarterbacks that are young guys in the draft or Kirk Cousins. So I think he's going to get a chance to fight for a starting job. And the big appeal with him, he's going to come cheap because the Broncos owe him $39 million this year, no matter what. And any team that signs Russell Wilson can just say, hey, we know you're getting that money no matter what. Whatever we give you offsets that. So he could end up signing a minimum deal, and the Broncos will still have to pay him so that he makes $39 million this year. So I think that makes him an interesting target for a team that's like, we can get him for just a couple $1 million. Let's give it a shot and see if he can bounce back.
Yeah, and Atlanta and Pittsburgh are the two teams, at least, that are being rumored as possibilities there. And, obviously Minnesota could be, depending on where Kirk Cousins ends up. We got a lot to cover. We're going to skip ahead a little bit on our content list here. Let's go to Mike Evans here for a minute. Mike Evans signed a 2-year, $52 million contract yesterday. That's going to give him $35 million guaranteed. This could be his last contract. I mean, he could retire in 2 years. It certainly is possible. But he played at a much better level, honestly, Jacob, than I thought he was going to play. I mean, I thought Godwin was going to be the guy for them. It looks like Godwin's career is virtually over. I mean, I didn't play almost at all last year, or at least at a high level. Evans is still playing at a very high level, so this does make sense.
Many people agreed with you and thought Godwin was going to take over the number one role. I thought that was the case, too. I thought he was going to have good chemistry with Mayfield, but Evans just kind of seems like this guy who Father Time isn't going to really catch up to very well. And Evans is actually younger than people realize, too. I think he's only like 30 years old, but he's a big physical receiver, and those guys tend to kind of slow down a little earlier than the other guys because he doesn't have elite speed. But Evans is just such a great jump ball receiver, and he finds ways to get open with his route running. So in that regard, I think he can play with anyone. I think the Buccaneers being able to bring him back is a massive win, because if they can retain Baker Mayfield, all of a sudden their offense looks pretty good. And yeah, there are questions. Will Baker Mayfield have a down year after his offensive coordinator, Dave Canales, left to go coach the Panthers? Fair question for sure. But for the Buccaneers, you're keeping a franchise icon who's had 10 straight 1,000-yard seasons to open his career. It's a no-brainer to bring him back. And it's a short-term deal. So even if he does regress, they're really not going to lose much by kind of bringing him back on board with that type of money.
Yep, agreed. Okay, so let's get to one more player here with the franchise tag. That is L'Jarius Sneed, $19 million for him, coming off arguably the best year of his career. In fact, I would say the average fan, Jacob, probably didn't know his name going into the season. And that's the danger zone here, I suppose, for any NFL player, is what we saw last year legit as far as him being the best cover corner in the NFL? Or do you think the Chiefs end up selling high on a player like this?
I think the Chiefs are going to sell high on him, and I think it's the smart move or the prudent move, because the logic is you can't keep him and Chris Jones on that defense. So you have to decide which player is more important to this team. We saw in the Super Bowl, Chris Jones made the play of the game, arguably, when he got pressure up the middle on Brock Purdy on that possession in overtime to force the Niners to settle for a field goal. And that tells you everything you need to know about Chris Jones. He just gets so much pressure. And the most important thing in the NFL right now is to get after the quarterback. So as good as Sneed was, I think they'll be confident that they can develop some of these younger cornerbacks who Steve Spagnuolo's done great work with, like the Trent McDuffies of the world and Shamari Connor, and I believe Jalen Watkins. I might have the wrong Jalen Watson. So they have plenty of young talent there. So I think that they'll be willing to offload L'Jarius Sneed, see what type of draft compensation they can get, and try to bring back Chris Jones with the money that they otherwise would have allocated to Smith. But it's this tough tag and trade thing is not always easy to pull off. So it'll be interesting to see if their gamble pays off here.
All right, last one here. This player, Xavier Worthy, wide receiver for Texas. How much did he help his draft stock with this 4.21 40-yard dash?
I think he helped it a lot. I think that speed really shows up on tape, and he was productive at Texas too. So I think some team in the late first round is going to look at him and say, hey, this guy could be like Will Fuller for us, and if he stays healthy, hey, we're going to have speed on our offense. So I'm interested to see where he goes, but I think first round now.
All right, Jacob, thanks again for coming on NewsWire. Great content. We'll talk again soon. Thanks for coming on.
All right, sounds good, Greg. Take care.
All right, we'll be right back.
The Lakers lose by double digits last night on the road in Phoenix against the Suns. The Suns get their first victory following the All-Star break, winning by 10 in covering.
Anthony Davis played 42 minutes in that game. LeBron James played 37 minutes in a loss. This is the same thing. It's like repeating this over and over and over. Sure, do you want to win these basketball games? Yes, but you sort of say to yourself, all right, at what cost do we have?
The early line. Only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like
This is
the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in. This is
they're
the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that lightning in a bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The books are treating the Celtics 4 points better at minimum than maybe every single team in the NBA. And so far, I believe they've covered every game since the break.
The Celtics' strict goal here, anything less than a finals appearance and a finals championship is going to be a failure for the Celtics. They got all the pressure in the world across the board here.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
NewsWire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage Late
Sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. Did you watch the NFL Combine last week? Maybe. Did you bet on the NFL Combine last week? Wow, that's a new level of interest in sports betting. But hey, we're betting on everything these days. Let's bring in Mike Mazzeo from Legal Sports Report. And Mike, this day and age, it's like if there's an event happening, these sports books will find a way to create odds on it. Now, I understand that this is not available everywhere, and there is some creativity in order to make this happen in some states. But I think what we're learning here is just the appetite for sports betting is so strong that if there's anything being televised with a ball of any kind, I think they're going to try to find a way to accept bets on it.
Yeah, Craig, I agree. I think, probably a lot of fun for people that were watching the Combine already, had interest in 40-yard dash times and some of the other, events these guys do before they get picked. So, a lot of the stronger regulators, I think the surprising part was a lot of the stronger regulators that you think of when you look at the country, New York, Ohio, New Jersey, Michigan, Massachusetts did not offer this. And in New York's case, we asked a bunch of jurisdictions and they said, this doesn't fall into the definition of a sporting event, a proof sporting event. It's not a game, right? It's a competition of, skill, endurance, a lot of speed for these guys as they're testing to see where they're going to fall. And, scouts and executives are looking at them to see where they fall in the draft. And so, and then also if the times are wrong, right? Sometimes you have an unofficial time and then they change it, right? You might think you want to bet one of these prop bets and then you lose it because the time is not correct after the NFL checks in on it. So, yeah, they don't have an official data provider. We know Genius provides for the NFL during the season, but all the results are posted on the NFL's website. And so this is the second year doing this. I think we'll kind of see how it goes. Probably not the most lucrative market for sports books, but, the NFL is king. And anytime you can have sort of an NFL side event for a lot of these states, there'll be at least some tax revenue coming in, certainly some handle on all these prop bets that were offered. And we'll see where states go with this. Did they decide to keep, does it expand or do states decide, what, we're not going to offer this anymore? That's something that we'll see as we head into year 3 of this, Craig.
Yeah, no, we really don't know. And again, iGaming and, virtual gaming betting, I mean, there's so many different options that could potentially be out there or not. Just depends on a lot of the state legislation. Okay, so one of the stories of the summer was this Iowa sports betting scandal. And now that it's kind of put to bed here, and I think surprisingly, the fact that it's completely dismissed is going to catch some people by surprise, Mike. But is the reason why this was dismissed just because of logistics as to how they obtained some of the information? Or is it just because they felt there was no wrongdoing here? I want to make sure there's a differentiation here in what we're describing in the process.
Yeah, Craig, I think you hit it on the head, right? When you said, they called it an illegal search and seizure. It was using that Cabana monitoring tool at the dorms in Iowa with an agent kind of going rogue. His superiors said, don't do this. He did it anyway, then expanded the search to the athletic facility. They found a lot of underage betting, players that had used their parents' accounts basically and were under 21. But, the way that this agent at the DCI in Iowa obtained this information, and the fact that GeoComply said, you can't use this tool anymore because you're using it for the wrong reasons. That all added up to this case against these 4 former Iowa State 3 football players and 1 wrestler ended up being dismissed. And now Van Plum, who represents 2 of those players, told me last week that there's going to be a civil suit filed. So we'll see. It's unfortunate, Craig, for some of these kids, their college eligibility went away. And it's strange because in some cases they did something wrong. And if it was found where they had a warrant to make the search, it would have been fine. But, these kids did lose their careers for an illegal search, basically a warrantless search. So, yeah, I think this, the fallout of this case, we'll see where it goes. We have DCI saying they were disappointed in the fact that the state pulled the case. And then we have lawyers saying, we can't believe you're saying that given how you went about getting this information. So, yeah, I think we haven't heard the end of this story. Obviously, you hope it's just kind of the lasting ramifications are in Iowa, that the DCI, the, criminal investigative unit, they messed up in this case. And you hope in other states that they learn from this. If you're going to go after students, you need a warrant. If you're going to try to geofence or use this Cabana monitoring tool to find perpetrators. And so, yeah, I mean, it's super disappointing. We'll see where the NCAA goes with it, as it maybe a lot of this is out of their hands, so to speak, but athletes need to be educated. Parents need to be educated, Do not have your son or daughter have an account in your name if they're not 21, and they should have their own account if they are 21. So yeah, I think a lot to be learned here, Craig, and I think this isn't over in terms of news coming out of this thing.
Yeah, no, I think, again, it's interesting that there were some issues going on without a doubt, but the way that the information was obtained, at least for the time being, puts an end to this story. But as you said, probably more down the line with this. Okay, now in terms of daily fantasy, we got some more logistics in the state of Massachusetts. I see the list here of the DFS operators that received a letter telling them they can't operate anymore in the state. And these, by the way, a couple of these websites I have played on before. So I wonder if this is just the beginning of the end for some of these operators, Mike, in general. I know maybe for the time being, it's easy to say that, and we'll go through it here, that a couple of these operators can survive even though they're not in play in Massachusetts. But I would think if I am a business owner of some of these companies, I got to start thinking of alternatives here.
Yeah, Craig, and this is the against the house, right? That, Underdog and Prize Picks, which we talk about pretty much daily and report on weekly, have shut down, against the house fantasy games in a lot of these states. And so Massachusetts sent 10 cease and desist letters last week. I believe there's a response to those due March 8th. So we should have more to come, in, if not late this week, early next week, in terms of where we're at. But, Underdog and Prize Picks are both going to go peer-to-peer in Massachusetts. They've done this in other jurisdictions. And then, yeah, like you said, some big names, right? Yahoo, which I think we all grew up with, was one of the first fantasy operators, and Sleeper Fantasy, which a lot of people played fantasy football on. So, a lot of big names on this list. And Massachusetts, the new attorney general coming in and pretty strong, like a lot of other states, saying against the house pick'em, you can't do it. It's too much like sports betting. Massachusetts has sports betting license open. Underdog is getting a sports betting license in North Carolina. Maybe they want to get one in Massachusetts. We'll see whether they want to put out that outlay in terms of taxes and, the money to get a license to offer sports betting. But certainly that's an outlet for some of these big companies. And, Underdog and Prize Picks especially have generated a lot of interest with the younger generation, the younger demographics. So we'll see how they can kind of adjust, pivot, and, where we're going here. But, Massachusetts coming in pretty strong. They have a really strong regulatory body. I met Kathy Judd Stein for the first time yesterday in Newark, New Jersey at a Seton Hall gaming law boot camp. And, she's one of those regulators there. They really want to come in strong and protect the law. And if these operators are, going out of bounds, we've seen that with the college betting in Massachusetts, a lot of the fines they set. In Massachusetts, the Attorney General's office is the one that kind of runs daily fantasy sports and regulates it. And then the commission takes the taxes on that. So, yeah, a lot to get to here in Massachusetts. Again, March 8th coming up here for a response to the 10 companies that got the cease and desist. We'll see. I'm hopeful, I would think, that they shut down or try to pivot and how they're operating in the state. And then we'll see where we are from there.
Yeah, no, it's I guess the way I would put it to you, Mike, as we close this conversation out, is that we can't predict the future. But would you guess in a year or two from now, all of these sort of fantasy games that are not, FanDuel, DraftKings, et cetera, are wiped out in the sports betting legal markets? Because it does seem that wherever sports betting is legal, these operators are not going to be able to operate.
Yeah, I think, against the house fantasy, right? We've seen it in multiple states. The regulators don't want it. They've sent cease and desist, especially to Prize Picks and Underdog. They've ceased, you saw Craig in Florida, March 1st, they both had to be out. They both obviously accepted that. Seen in New York, the fine, Prize Picks got fined, $15 million for operating illegal games there and operating illegally. And so, yeah, these regulators are cracking down on that. That's one of the things that was talked about yesterday at Seton Hall was, that regulators, they're going to use their power. If they feel something's illegal, they're going to want it off. And, for these operators, that's what they're going to have to deal with. And, they're going to have to be agile enough to pivot or offer something new or figure out a way to get a license to be able to operate. That was kind of the separator for Underdog and Prize Picks was these, pick them against the house games that seem very popular again with that younger generation. So, can they figure out a way to get them back or something? It doesn't seem like that's the case now. Depending on how they pivot, can they continue to be disruptors to the likes of FanDuel and DraftKings, who have pretty much gotten their way, right? FanDuel came out and said, we don't want these games. They're illegal. We want everyone on an even playing field. And these companies had to cease and desist in a lot of states. So, we'll see where this goes. Again, another story that we're certainly not done with here at Legal Sports Report. And, on NewsWire with you and I'm sure we're going to this topic.
Yeah, I would guess that the next topic with these operators will be a proposed tax rate for all of them, and to see whether or not they make enough money to be able to pay any kind of taxes, and then the battle of how much they're paying versus the main operators, and will they allow that even? Like in New York, for example, can Underdog pay 50% tax on the money that they can't afford that. They're not making enough money to be able to do that. So kind of being forced out, it looks like, in a way. But you're right. Compelling story. We will continue with Mike. Thanks again for coming on NewsWire. Really appreciate it. We'll catch up again next week.
Thanks a lot, Craig.
All right. We got one day off in between golf. So the Cognizant Classic in Palm Beach Gardens lasted all the way through Monday because of rain. So we have Tuesday off and Wednesday off to get all of our picks in for the upcoming Arnold Palmer Classic. Used to be called the Bay Hill. So they go from Palm Beach Gardens to Orlando. And the good news is Brady Kannon is going to be with us next to give us a preview of what we could potentially expect this upcoming weekend on the PGA Tour. So stay with us here on NewsWire. We'll be back right after these messages. Don't go away.
The Lakers lose by double digits last night on the road in Phoenix against the Suns. The Suns get their first victory following the All-Star break, winning by 10 in covering.
Anthony Davis played 42 minutes in that game. LeBron James played 37 minutes in a loss. This is the same thing. It's like repeating this over and over and over. Sure, do you want to win these basketball games? Yes, but you sort of say to yourself, all right, at what cost do we have?
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
Third,
this is the Penn State
rule. Be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The books are treating the Celtics 4 points better at minimum than maybe every single team in the NBA. And so far, I believe they've covered every game since the break.
The Celtics' strict goal here, anything less than a finals appearance and a finals championship is going to be a failure for the Celtics. They got all the pressure in the world across the board here.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The Early Line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
NewsWire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
Late
sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. The Arnold Palmer Invitational is coming up this week as the Florida swing continues. But before we get to that, I thought it'd be an interesting conversation to talk about one of the top players in the PGA Tour. Of course, that is Rory McIlroy ahead of the tournament coming up in Orlando. I mean, some of these smaller names have won a lot of these tournaments on the PGA Tour, and Rory looking, of course, for one of the big wins. Keith Stewart was on a podcast called Read the Line. He is on a podcast every week called Read the Line. He was on this morning on the early line with our very own Donnie Rightside and Joe Ranieri talking about what the future may hold for Rory Mac.
We always like to recap before we move ahead here. The Cognizant Classic, which, if I'm reading this correctly, first-time winner Austin Eckroat at a 17 under par cashes in a ticket for $1.6 million. But the questions here also, some other guys in the field like Rory McIlroy. What happened last week? What did we see? And how can we use this for the future here, Keith?
Well, Rory McIlroy, he was the favorite last week. His odds were about 7-1 to start the week. Austin Eckroat, for the 8th week in a row, gives us a long shot bomb to win on the PGA Tour. He started the week at 90-1, and he came through on what was Sunday, Monday. Huge rain delay on Sunday, kind of broke up the final round, made it a little choppy. The real story there was Shane Lowry. He had the lead going into the final round, never got the tee off really until late Sunday. He comes out Monday. He kind of fell apart. Rory had the bear trap catch him there on Saturday. That put him back in the pack. He had kind of a mediocre finish, but Rory's coming to Bay Hill and the Arnold Palmer Invitational, a place where he's played 9 times. And in those last 7, he's had top 13 finishes. He's won in 2018. He's never finished outside the top 30. So if it's time for Rory to win here in the States, this might be a perfect fit.
Thanks very much. Let's get on now to the big tournament this week in Orlando as we get ready to preview the Arnold Palmer Invitational. And Brady Kannon is with us once again. What a great pick he had. What a few great picks he had last week. Let's bring him in to get a preview and also talk about what we saw this past week at Palm Beach Gardens. Brady, thanks for coming back on the show. How are you?
Yeah, you bet, Craig. Great picks if you had like top 20 or top 30 finish, but the outright winner still eludes me so far this season. But you're right. It was an interesting tournament, and I did tab Austin Eckroat at the halfway point and then tabbed him again when they extended into a Monday finish. I said, this guy's the man to beat. And he played very consistently all week long, despite the weather changes. You had a lot of wind on the second day, no wind on the first day. Then you had stoppages because of thunderstorms on Sunday. And despite all of that, he remained very consistent. He was at the top of the field in strokes gained off the tee, greens and regulation, strokes gained approach, and his putting only improved. At the midway point, he was like 27th in the field for strokes gained putting, which is very good, but not crazy good. I like to avoid a guy when I see him like number 1 or number 2 in the field in strokes gained putting, but he's not really doing anything else well. That tells you the putter is just keeping him afloat, and that's not likely to hold up over 4 days. But Eckroat was just steady and consistent, and he got home with a win.
Yeah, and I believe I saw first time in decades that they had to finish that tournament on a Monday in Palm Beach Gardens. Usually the weather this time of the year, Brady, is not formidable. It's usually great, but we got a lot of rain over the weekend for whatever reason. Okay, so Florida swing continues. A lot of the big names going to play this week in Orlando at formerly called the Bay Hill, I think, now called the Arnold Palmer Invitational, which is where Arnie lived and played for many, many years. The odds over on FanDuel tell us that, once again, betting the favorites, really nice opportunity here. I mean, generally speaking, Rory, because of what happened to Rory McIlroy and Scottie Scheffler, Brady, in the first part of this golf season, is you can get plus 650 and plus 850 on these guys. And I don't know that you would be able to do that at the beginning of a tournament if they were playing better. Xander also 16-1. Victor Hovland, who finished last season so well, is 16-1. Cantlay 18-1. Eventually, one of these guys is going to come in, Brady. I don't know when it's going to be, but eventually a favorite is going to win a golf tournament. Is this the weekend it happens?
Yeah, eventually, right? I mean, it's really been incredible. The shortest price, we've been through 9 events on the PGA Tour this season. The shortest price is about 40 or 45 to 1 just 2 weeks ago in Mexico with Jake Knapp. But this may be the week, Craig. Bay Hill typically churns out, a pretty classy player. I mean, Tiger Woods won here 8 times, Rory McIlroy, Scotty Scheffler. Last year, Kurt Kitayama was a little bit of an outlier. If you look at the correlated courses, the courses that I think relate quite a bit to Bay Hill, Kitayama has finished very well in a lot of those, but he wasn't that household name. But this course and this tournament typically does produce a star class player for a winner. We've seen Jason Day win here, Mark Leishman. So, I think we're going to get another big time player this week that is going to emerge. And it may not be McIlroy or Scheffler, but I would expect them to contend once again. This is a signature event. It's a no-cut event, only 69 players in the field. And I'll run down my card for you, Craig. I did not go all the way to the top with Scotty or Rory, but just one removed from there. I started with Victor Hovland, and I got him at 17-1. And you talked about how hot he finished up last year. He hasn't been nearly as hot to start this year, but he showed some signs at the Genesis Invitational a few weeks ago in Los Angeles, where he finished 19th. This golf course is very demanding. You have relatively narrow fairways. It's almost 7,500 yards. You have very thick rough. And so you're going to need a guy that can drive it long and straight, hit his long irons well, a tremendous ball striker. That's probably the 3 most important things as far as the formula that is going to produce good results at Bay Hill. And Victor Hovland does all of those very well. He's finished 10th here before. He's finished runner-up here before. Olympia Fields, one of my correlated courses this week. He won there at the end of last year in the FedEx Cup Series. So I think this could be the week that Victor Hovland puts it together. Like I said, he hasn't been red hot. He was pretty good. Now this golf course feels like such a good spot for him. It could be the week. And then I dropped down a little bit further to Sam Burns at 26-1, another correlated course, TPC Scottsdale in Phoenix, where Burns just finished 3rd. He's finished 6th there before. He's had other good finishes at the correlated courses. And this guy's arguably the hottest player on tour right now. He has 4 consecutive top 10 finishes. And I think his good play is going to continue. And I think he'll contend once again. And then I dropped down a little bit further off of that and went with Cam Young at 30-1, who has been playing exceptional as of late. He finished 8th in Phoenix, 16th in LA, and was 4th last week at the Cognizant Classic in Palm Beach. He's also had great finishes here at Bay Hill, including a runner-up. He's another one of those guys like Hovland that drives it far and straight, hits his long irons well, and is a great ball striker. And then I went to Matt Fitzpatrick, whose correlated course history is just incredible. Here's a rundown of what Fitzpatrick has done on the courses I looked at. 14th and 9th here at Bay Hill, 15th and 10th in Phoenix, 10th and 13th at Congaree in South Carolina, 5th at Southern Hills for the 2022 PGA Championship, 6th and runner-up at Olympia Fields. And you're getting him at 32-1, and I've seen him crash down a little bit. This morning I saw him as low as 24-1. But I think Fitzpatrick makes a ton of sense here. Good wind player. We expect that always in Florida. And then my longest shot, again, fits that mold of a long iron player, total driving ball striker type guy, and that's Keegan Bradley. He's had 4 top 10 finishes here at Bay Hill, including a runner-up. Got him at 55-1. And then finally, Craig, this morning, a late addition here. I added Tommy Fleetwood as well at 32-1. Another guy who's finished great here at Bay Hill, as well as the correlated courses. Every one of my guys, maybe Sam Burns, not quite the mold, but based on current form, I wanted to add him. But every other one of my guys is good with the long irons, total driving, ball striking. I think that's pretty much the formula you're looking for this week at Bay Hill.
Yeah, I wanted to expand the conversation here a minute on golf betting just in general. And I don't know if this is an easy answer for you with the question that I have. But unlike most sports, the NFL, the NBA, and I understand there's going to be different prop markets for every sport, But what I've noticed, Brady, and I don't know if you've noticed the same thing, when I look before the tournaments on FanDuel and DraftKings and even see some of the listings over at the Westgate and other sports books too, there is such a wildly different market available on these head-to-heads with these golfers like we've never seen. Like why is it so random and so different with all of these books? It seems like they have their own opinions. And I'm not talking about the odds. I'm talking about, like, for example, a Fitzpatrick versus Young with a favorite of -110. Like, every market seems to be different. And I wonder eventually if we find that all the markets pair up and become the same one day. But for now, if you have an opinion on something in golf, maybe there's an advantage to be had because you just simply can find something somewhere that you can't find in others.
Yeah, it's a great point, Craig. And sometimes you can find, a lot of times you go through that menu of matchups and you've got, let's say, Sam Burns against Victor Hovland, two guys that I like this week, and they're
Right.
in a matchup, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to do anything there necessarily. I don't want to bet against one of my guys. And then you go to another book and you might see a different matchup where it looks pretty attractive to you. I know here locally at the Westgate, let's see, we're at Circus Sports here, they make their own head-to-head matchups.
Okay.
And then you have like the South Point, BetMGM, I believe. They pretty much have like the universal screen of head-to-head matchups that you will see, at offshore books. There is kind of a universal set of matchups, but then there's different books. I think Caesars will also create their own. So that can be good and bad. I love the universal matchup because you can find different prices, on the same head-to-heads, but also where you have these books create their own head-to-head matchups. Sometimes you can find the exact matchup that you prefer versus what the universal offering is. So you're right. And we may have talked about this before. It's really the best market to bet into in golf wagering. And I risk the most amount of money on the head-to-heads. The outrights, I risk very little money. It's hard to hit that. I will risk more money on top 20 finishes. But the very most risk is in the head-to-heads. That's where you have the best chance to win.
Yeah, and the universals are not universal because they're not available on FanDuel and DraftKings. Like, they create their own. So,
yeah,
I wonder how they grade the market. It's a fascinating dynamic. I think golf betting is like no other sports betting because
there's
of some
so
of those
many
reasons.
Different things you can do with golf betting. It's extensive.
Yeah, that's why we have you here, Brady. Good luck this week. We'll talk again next week.
All
Thanks
right.
for coming on.
Thanks, Craig.
All right, we'll be back with more as we wrap up the show. Tom Brady, living near me in South Florida, has added something new to his home. You may be surprised what it is.
The Lakers lose by double digits last night on the road in Phoenix against the Suns. The Suns get their first victory following the All-Star break, winning by 10 in covering.
Anthony Davis played 42 minutes in that game. LeBron James played 37 minutes in a loss. This is the same thing. It's like repeating this over and over and over. Sure, do you want to win these basketball games? Yes, but you sort of say to yourself, all right, at what cost do we have?
The early line, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But
Right.
if we make them a third,
They get in.
Third,
This is
they're
the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
And that 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the book.
The books are treating the Celtics 4 points better at minimum than maybe every single team in the NBA. And so far, I believe they've covered every game since the break.
The Celtics' strict goal here, anything less than a finals appearance and a finals championship is going to be a failure for the Celtics. They got all the pressure in the world across the board here.
Game time decisions only on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
NewsWire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
late
sort
night.
of has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. As we end the program today, Tom Brady spotted this weekend at Gulfstream. Our friend Jim Ghazali would have been interested in that at the horse racing in Hallandale Beach, Florida. Also spotted near Tom Brady is his new house. They're calling it, I guess, this billionaire bunker area. He's moved to South Florida, to Miami Beach, and installing what a lot of people think is going to be, it's already one of the next big sports, let's be honest, but even bigger. Looks like Tom Brady's taking this pickleball thing to another level. This guy is installing a pickleball court at his house in South Florida. And maybe indeed Tom Brady, who's going to be busy calling games on Fox, I believe, this year, right? As the #1 broadcast team, also going to be playing a lot of pickleball maybe in his future. Remember when the cool thing was to install like a bowling alley in your house or a, tennis court nearby? Now it's all about pickleball, right? In fact, my son, he plays baseball, travel baseball, and we play at a park that has pickleball courts, and those things are always filled, man, at night. Like there's like 20 of them. You cannot find a place to play. This thing is as big as it gets. But anyway, Tom Brady, he's got enough money to do whatever he wants. Pickleball is his next thing. Okay, that will do it for our action-packed edition of the show with a lot of news and notes on the program today. In fact, I'm sure Coast to Coast is going to have a ton of that for you coming up at 3 o'clock Eastern. That's our next show here live on SportsGrid. In fact, the early line's coming up next, followed by Coast to Coast, and then our in-game live game time decisions and in-game live overtime programming takes over the SportsGrid network with all that's happening. Huge night in college basketball as well, NBA, NHL as well. Also want to thank Jacob Camenker from Sporting News, Brady Kannon for coming on the show as well, and Mike Mazzeo from Legal Sports Report. In addition to our associate producer, Frank, and our producer, Michael Cohen, I'm Craig Mish. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day here on NewsWire. Our midweek edition of the show is tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern, and I will speak to you then. Get all your bets in. Hopefully you have a great night in sports betting, and if not, you're just enjoying the program. Thanks for watching our show today. We'll be right back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern, for our next edition of NewsWire. I will see you then.